All right, so I'm going to walk through a sample problem of how I can go about creating a graph of a periodic function, like the one you see on the left there. How we could go about creating the graph of that by hand. So we're really looking at this function over here, the one that I just underlined in yellow. So very first thing, I'm always going to think about what does the function actually look like, the parent function. So I realize that I'm looking at the sine function. And so my sine function really would look like, something like that. Okay. Now, what I really want to uncover, and just like any good problem, we're not going to solve it all at once. We're actually going to look at individual characteristics at a time. And so when I'm looking at, for instance, for me, I'm looking at this plus 1. And what I know that does is that takes the graph and it shifts it up by a single unit. Which means, if I think about it, my x-axis, that center line of my graph, isn't going to be at the x-axis anymore. My center line, that vertical division, is actually going to be shifted up by 1. And so what we're going to be looking at is it's going to be right through there. Shifted up 1 unit, which is awesome. And then I know that's kind of my center line, so I'm going to go up from there and down from there. Up from there and down from there. So it becomes a question, how much am I going to go up or down from there? So what controls the amplitude is basically what we're looking at. If we come back, we know that this, that's bad. We know that that -2 kind of controls it. So I'm just going to look at the 2 for a second, leave the negative off, That 2, remember, that's a vertical stretch factor. Stretching it out that way. And so that means the amplitudes are now going to be 2, or I'm going to go 2 spots up from my center line. So my max is now going to be at 3. And I'm going to go 2 spots down from my center line, so my minimum will be at -1. That's interesting. And then that negative, what does that negative on the 2 do? Well, remember, that negative is really making all our y values kind of flip-flop. So there's going to, whatever was positive becomes negative, and whatever's negative becomes positive. So that means I'm starting to think my graph's going to look, more like this, just shift it up, So I'm going to have to still shift that bad boy up. But just kind of thinking about the parent function. And then, I still haven't covered everything, but I'm pretty close. We've done most of the work. So this pi over 2 is the only thing that I haven't really addressed. So what does that pi over 2 do? Red's such a rough color. So let's go with green instead. Just red stands out too much. So what's that pi over 2 do? Remember, that's a horizontal stretch and compress. It's a speed factor. So that means everything is going to be going, the speed is like pi over 2 radians per second, or everything kind of gets shrank by that pi over 2 factor. And so we're going to kind of get this compression piece. And for me, I always think about the period. I know a normal period is 2 pi. But I'm going to compress that, or divide that by how fast I'm going, divide that by that pi over 2. Which, that looks weird. I don't know how to divide fractions. Well, let's pretend I don't, okay? So it's 2 pi divided by pi over 2. I could think about it as multiplying by the reciprocal, so 2 over pi, because it's easier to multiply fractions for me. And 2 pi is really 2 pi over 1. And so when we do this, wow, that's going to be cool. So the pi's are going to cancel. Pi's are going to cancel. And I'm going to be left with really 4, which means my new period is 4. So that means, from 0 to 4, I'm going to see a full period. All right. So I'm going to see a full period by the time I get to 4, right there. It's going to start right here, which means I'd see another period by the time I get to 8, or I could go backwards and see a period by the time I get to -4. Now for me, I always kind of like to make my divisions, or make some points now. I want to see where this is going to be, So I know that I want to keep in mind that this is what it's going to look like from that centerline axis. So I know that, you know, my first point is kind of that standard right there. I know the end of the period is going to go back to the same spot, right? So I know that's going to be a point on it. I know that sine's going to be going down first, so I'm going to hit a minimum first, and that's going to be a, there's my divisions, you know, quarters. 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters. So a quarter of the way through, well, that'd be 1. It's going to be down at a minimum. It's going to be down, down there-ish. Program's not cooperating. And then it's going to come back up here to that center line after another unit of 1, because that's, you know, a quarter of the way through. And then I'm going to come up to the maximum. You know, up there after another quarter period. And then I'm going to come back to my center line. And so I can just start to sketch this basic shape. Not going to be perfect, but you get the idea. That's really bad, right? Okay, and then I could keep it going if I wanted to. Let me get back down here. I'm going to get back up there. I'm going to get back up there. Can I do it? Something like that, and then I could go backwards even if I wanted. I'm going to get, you know, up to there, and I'm going to come down to there, and then just keep that basic shape going, which makes a lot of sense. So that's cool. Now you can see where it is, and I apologize in a second here. That graph's all going to go away, but keep in mind where it is, where you see it, because now when I go back to the program and I click on the function, kinda the same. You know what I mean? I mean, check it out. And again, check it out. Looks the same, and that tells me I've done a good job. I know I was able to make sense of each thing one step at a time and create a pretty good quality sketch of what this graph looks like. I hope this helps you if you watch this, and, you know, hopefully it helps with the homework and as we move forward, and just your understanding of how to work through a problem in general. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about breaking it into manageable chunks and handling one thing at a time, building our solution, not knowing our solution. Have a great one.